I just want to explain a little bit more about this passage. The Ebenezer stone is what we consider a stone of help. And as you saw what Sue read about how God helped the Israelites, prior to that, the Philistines had defeated the Israelites twice, and they had taken the Ark of Covenant, and the Philistines were very demoralized. But at the same time, while they had been losing to the Philistines, they also hadn't been holding God in high esteem. They had been worshiping the idols. So they had lost favor with God at the same time. So this crying out to God was a resubmission for them to say, God, we need your help. And God responded. In the Old Testament, whenever the Israelites would see God helping them, they would frequently stack piles of stones in that location as little memorials and ways of remembering for future generations or other travelers along the road that this was a time and a place where God had helped. It was like a remembrance. Hence, the whole idea of an Ebenezer stone is something that you can do in your own homes, with your own children, grandchildren, just for yourself, to remember that God is our helper. If there's a time in your life when you feel like God really was there, you don't want to forget that, because this is where our help comes from. So you can stack stones and collect them. Some people keep journals, write things down. But think how wonderful this would be for those of us who pass on to leave behind things for your children or grandchildren to remember how strong your faith was and be able to recount those stories. It's ways of sharing with our families of ways that God was instrumental in our lives. It's a remembrance, it's a physical remembrance. So if you didn't get one, please pick one up. I'm going to leave the basket here with the stones. We can get them anytime. But I just wanted people to think about this little tradition that came out of the Old Testament that we can still employ today, and it was really meaningful. So with that, we're going to start with 3 stories. Sarah's going to start and tell us a little bit of time in her life when God was influential. And then Lee's going to follow, and then Mika is going to end with us today.
Good morning. Good morning. Can I say I'm nervous? In Indonesia, we would ask a minta maaf, and please forgive me for any mistakes before we get started. So bear with me. I was brought up attending church and Sunday school at the Methodist church my parents and grandparents attended. One summer, I was asked to babysit at a week-long Christian retreat held on the campus of Eastern Nazarene College near my home. The young children would be in the nursery while their parents attended daytime seminars and evening worship. The main speakers were Dr. E. Staley Jones, a Methodist missionary who had served in India, and Dr. Tom Caruth, a professor of missions at Asbury Seminary. One evening, I somehow attended worship instead of helping in the nursery. At the end of the service, a traditional altar call was given for anyone who felt the need for prayer. I felt led to kneel and pray and ask God to come into my life in a real way. He did just that for me. Later, in the spring, I attended confirmation classes, joined my home church, became active in the youth group, and attended midweek prayer and Bible study meetings. The following year, the meetings returned to that same campus. In one of the evening services, the challenge was given to answer the call to serve as an overseas missionary. I felt that God was calling me to do just that. I shared that call with my pastor, but not with many others. In my junior year of high school, as most students were doing, I began collecting information about possible colleges. Most of the schools were in New England. but one that I was interested in was the one I had heard about at those week-long summertime meetings, Asbury College. I was accepted at 3 schools, including Asbury. My parents were not terribly pleased that I decided to attend Asbury, but they accepted my decision. We drove to Kentucky from Massachusetts. Talk about culture shock. While at Asbury, I didn't tell anyone that I was called to the mission field, but the first close friend I made was a gal whose parents were missionaries serving in Africa. Then, one evening, while a group of us were sitting around the dorm, the gal pointed at me and said, "You are called to the mission field." Between my sophomore and junior years of college, I went to summer school and became friends with a married student, Susie Zikos, and her husband, John. Later, when the fall semester started, I went to visit Susie. When I got to their apartment, Susie was cutting out letters for a bulletin board. So I got a pair of scissors and started cutting out letters. Well, those letters were for a friend, Parker. I had met Parker, hadn't cared for him. He hadn't really liked me either. Anyway, when he came to get the letters, we walked back to campus together, stopped to put up his display for a missions conference. Gary, yes, Parker was Gary, had to stand on a table to choose the curtains, to close the curtains behind the display board. When he was getting down from the table, he took a misstep and landed on me. He liked to say he fell into my arms. After the conference was over, John called to say Parker wanted to take Susie and me to dinner to say thank you for our work on his display. So our first date was a double date with a married couple. That was in November 1966. We continued to date over the next few months. Gary went to Delaware early the next year to meet with the conference board of the ordained ministry. And that's our conference, by the way, Pendel. While he was there, he called and asked me to marry him. Yes, he proposed to me over the phone. We were married June 10th, 1967. We both had a year of school left, Gary at seminary, me at college. After we graduated, Gary served as pastor in Dorchester County while I taught school. Our next assignment was to serve as missionaries in Indonesia. In preparation for our time overseas, we spent a semester in Michigan attending a missionary internship program. Daughter Beth was born at the end of that time. We were commissioned as missionaries in June of 1971 and entered Indonesia December of 1971. I again taught school at the small English language grade school, serving missionary kids and other children of the expat English-speaking community. Becky was born in October of 1975. In the spring of 1976, Gary and my dad paid for me and my daughters to fly from Indonesia to the States for my younger sister's wedding. The trip was quite an experience. There would be just the 3 of us, Beth, age 5, Becky, age 7 months, and me. Before we left, another missionary mom visited with me. She prayed that there would be angels to help me on the long trip. The afternoon we were to drive to the ferry from East Java to Bali for the flight to the States, Gary had to go to the home of the Indonesian consular official to obtain our visas. That's because Gary had forgotten to get them on time from the office. That gentleman was not happy to have his 2-hour rest disturbed. Thankfully, he released our passports with the needed exit re-entry visas. We drove to Banyuwangi at the east end of Java, checked into a small hotel to rest before the ferry ride. When we got in line for the ferry to Gilimanuk, Bali, there was no real order. Drivers were just cutting each other off. Gary managed to get a bus driver to let us in line. At the airport to Denpasar Negara Rai International Airport, the gate agent allowed Gary to help me get the girls and our carry-on bags onto the plane. Our plane stopped on Guam for refueling. Passengers were allowed to deplane and stay in the arrival lounge. Nice to stretch your legs. Once back on board, the cabin crew began distributing a sandwich lunch. They had to get rid of the food before we entered the United States because it might be contaminated, so that's why they were doing that. One of the crew asked Beth if she would like to help passing out the lunches. That made for a happy 5-year-old. We landed in Hawaii to go through customs. We had to collect all our checked bags for inspection. A gentleman on our flight got me a luggage cart and helped me load up all our baggage. Then it was on to Los Angeles. At the top of the exit stairs, a couple asked if I needed help with the girls. The husband helped Beth down so that I could carry Becky. The wife asked how I was getting from the international side of the airport to the domestic side. I had no idea. She said, "Come, share our taxi." At the domestic terminal, she asked which airline I needed. I didn't know, since my brother had arranged the flights. The couple waited with the girls while I called home and found out my onward carrier. After we said goodbyes, I found a little restaurant for us to have a bite. When I went to pay, I couldn't figure out the stateside currency. The cashier counted it out for me. When we finished eating, I asked her how to get to my airline. She closed up her restaurant and helped me get the girls to our gate. Once we were settled on the plane, I fell asleep. I was awakened by a cabin crew member shaking my shoulder, asking what I wanted to eat. I was so groggy I couldn't answer. She rather rudely said, "Here," and slammed a meal on my tray. A lady a couple rows ahead was getting out of her seat. She was snapped at to stay in her seat. The next I will never forget. The captain came on saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, there are systems that back up the systems that back up the systems. Our lights are showing us that we do not have landing gear. Please pay attention to the cabin crew as they give you instructions." A woman crew member stood at the front of the cabin and started to speak, but immediately broke into tears. A male crew member took the mic and calmly instructed us what to do. Male passengers were moved to seats by the emergency exits and instructed in the method of opening the exit doors and deploying the slides. We were then all told to lean down and grab our ankles. I had to have Becky on my lap while doing that. I looked over and saw a gentleman holding Beth's hand, reassuring her. Since we were on a nonstop flight, our airline did not have landing rights at the Denver airport. The pilot explained that we would circle while permission was given and while fuel was used up. Evidently, jettisoning fuel over Denver wasn't a good idea. As we finally approached the airport, the pilot said, "Ladies and gentlemen, below you, the beautiful city of Denver." Most of us were looking at the floor, not out the windows. The entire time I was looking at the floor, I was saying, "Dear Jesus, dear Jesus, dear Jesus." I was so afraid that we were going to crash and die. But we had landing gear. When the planes dropped, medics immediately came on the plane to escort several elderly folks who were having cardiac problems. Then those of us with children were escorted off before the rest of the passengers. The fellows who were seated by the windows were talking loudly about how exciting it was to see the ambulances and foam trucks racing down the runway beside us. We were escorted to a seating area where lines were forming so that people could be assigned to onward flights to Boston. A couple offered to sit with my girls while I got in line. My first tickets were on a plane to Chicago with a change of planes on to Boston. I was so exhausted I broke into tears. The thought of a plane change was too much. The husband took our tickets and exchanged them for a flight to New York and then on to Boston with no need to change planes. Our flight was so full, there were 2 passengers sitting on the floor at the bulkhead. The uneventful flight to Boston was a welcome change from all the tension of our previous flights. When we deplaned in Boston, the airport was eerily quiet. As I led the girls toward baggage claim, I heard footsteps. Turned out to be my dad looking for us. We collected my luggage and headed home to my folks' house. My mom had sent my dad with sweaters for us. Wise move. New England was certainly chillier than Indonesia. Looking back at that experience, I realized that God did provide angels to help and guide us all along the way. Our God is indeed faithful.
First, I'd like to thank Joni for inviting me. And we did not talk before this, so she doesn't know what I'm going to say. But I was really pleased when I walked in and I got this Ebenezer stone because, and I also found this on the table as you come in, and this was something that Jimmy and I handed out at my mom's funeral, which is the lost coin from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15. You know, when you find a penny or other coin where you didn't expect it. So to me, these are signs or symbols of God's love. So my theme was about symbols, so imagine my surprise. And this is, I didn't bring this. This was just sitting up there. So someone who was at my mom's funeral 2 years ago must have left it there. It's really special. So I'm going to read a quote for you first. When you return to your greatest source of pain and are somehow grateful for it, that's God's grace at work. And that is a quote by Gillian Benfield. I didn't know who she was, so I looked her up. Gillian was a TV journalist, but after receiving a life-altering diagnosis for her son, she realized this unexpected circumstance would change her life. In doing so, she discovered who she was and who God wanted her to become. She wrote a book called The Gift of the Unexpected, Discovering Who You Were Meant to Be When Life Goes Off Plan, in which you discover that your internal lessons in feeling pain in a healing way will lead to external purpose. Okay? So what I'd like to share with you this morning is how God has helped me cope with the loss of our youngest daughter, Jamie, who passed from colon cancer at the age of 33. I'd also like to share the importance of signs and symbols that remind us of our loved ones who have passed. Love letters, lots of them. Jamie was a letter writer. I have a big red box full of love notes from our daughter. It is overflowing, and I have piles more to find a box for. Most of her letters were embellished with heart-shaped balloons with happy faces, flowers, and in one case, a pair of steaming mugs of coffee, a happy face under which said, "I heart my mom," and the other, "I heart my dad," with a butterfly alongside it. She liked to draw my portrait, and on one she wrote below it, "My mom, she's sometimes very funny." That sometimes is very true because everyone knows her dad is the one with the sense of humor. Hearts and butterflies were a common theme for Jamie. The butterfly is spiritually symbolic, and some say signs of heaven sent from our loved ones as a sign that their soul and spirit lives on beyond the physical. As spirit animals, butterflies symbolize profound transformation, resilience, and the joy of life's journey. From 2 Corinthians 5:17, just as the butterfly goes through stages before it can fly, so we too must go through stages before we can soar with Christ. Jamie Happy Hutchison, she called herself, and when our friend Clint was kind enough to rent her the little house across the street from this church, she even had the address painted on her mailbox as simply Jamie Happy. Our mail lady, Wanda, and she's still our mail lady, and probably a lot of you get your mail delivered by Wanda, knew who that was, and in the years that followed, she also the letters from Jamie to us, even when they were addressed to Mom and Dad, with little else except Royal Oak printed on the envelope. One of my favorite cards from Jamie had a bunch of happy face stickers in it, along with a Band-Aid. She must have known I needed healing that day. And my very favorite, a happy face for a stamp addressed as, "A good note from Mom for Christmas only, love Jamie." Believe it or not, Wanda got that card from her mailbox to ours. It contained a $5 bill and change, so that, in Jamie's words, I could, quote, "get a guinea pig for a pet and help Dad with the hard money." I'm not sure what the hard money is, but I think I know what she was trying to say. We shared a birthday, this child and I. It's serendipitous to me that Doreen Enzer is here today because Doreen, my first birthday and Jamie's first birthday after she passed, Doreen gave me a candle that I still burn on her birthday every year. It's getting low now, Doreen. But I haven't seen Doreen in a while, so I think it's really special that you're here, because she was a dear friend of Jamie's, along with a lot of the ladies in here. So the morning I went into labor, I thought to myself, what a wonderful birthday gift God is going to give me today. That was not her due date. My sister, her Aunt Shelley, came over to take care of Sarah, and we were off to the hospital. From then on, Jamie gave me the adventure of a lifetime. There was never a dull moment when Jamie was involved. So many times we'd be in a room full of people, Jamie would start laughing hysterically at something she was thinking, or perhaps something that tickled her funny bone. Pretty soon the entire room would be vibrating with loud laughter. We would look at each other and ask between breaths, what are we laughing at? And someone would shout, who knows? And Jamie would lead yet another round of raucous belly laughs. God had sent me a child who was sensitive and had spiritual thoughts. Throughout her childhood, she talked about heaven. She often saw angels. I have a journal entry dated, and I keep a lot of journals, September 20th, 2003. She said to me, when I went to heaven before I was born, I saw a friend. We were trying on noses, and he was copying off me. The boy said to Jesus, is she going to have a fantasy going to heaven and visiting with you? And then she asked me, is love heaven? Our dear friend Joy Frost has written us many beautiful letters over the years. In one she says, God has designed Jamie in a magnificent way, perfect in his plan. Another time Jamie said to me, Mom, if I hadn't been born to you, I would have found you. A friend said to me when Jamie was only around 8 years old, Jamie has a special aura around her. She is someone bringing a unique message. One of my favorite paintings that Jamie made is of a little girl holding her lambs as they sit on a sloping hill with a little house behind it. It reminds me so much of the 23rd Psalm. Although we hoped Jamie would live to see Christmas, our dear girl passed on November 17th, 2017. So many in this church, many of you sitting here today, honored Jamie by helping us with her celebration of life. The music, the food, the service itself, we felt God's love and grace surrounding us and holding us close in heart. Just before Christmas 2017, Wendy, the artist at Talbot Hospice, delivered 2 paintings to us. One depicted a dream I had had 2 days after Jamie passed away. The artistry perfectly captured the opening of the French doors into a blissful garden with one purple rose, which is exactly as it was outside of her hospice room. Our first Christmas without Jamie, I gave my husband chimes. When we hear them, we think of those just out Jamie's room at the hospice house, and they remind us of the night before Jamie's passing. They are a beautiful reminder of her love. About 1 month after Jamie passed, we were participating in a child loss support group at Talbot Hospice. We talked about symbols. Some of the group felt close to their lost children whenever there were butterflies or cardinals nearby. Some collected angels. Certainly, most of us had received gifts as Christmas ornaments or figurines in the form of angels or doves in remembrance of our children. In the New Testament, the dove appears in scenes associated with Jesus' birth and baptism, often symbolizing the Holy Spirit. In Matthew 3:16, the heavens open after Jesus' baptism. Jesus is endowed with a spirit of holiness and innocence, which brings peace. In Genesis 6:9, Noah sends out a dove 3 times to see if floodwaters have receded. Do any of you have signs or symbols that remind you of your loved one? Anybody? Well, for our daughter, it is ladybugs. For Sarah, her sister. They seem to be around in abundance, even in the cold winter, to bring reassurance that her little sister's spirit was not only present, but at peace. She says when she is alone and quietly painting, a ladybug comes to her. Only last week, while taking our out-of-state friends to Ocean City, we walked to the inlet to watch the fishermen. Despite the winds and crashing waves, a single ladybug landed on my friend's arm. I immediately greeted it with, "Hello, Jamie, thanks for visiting us today." The ladybug is often seen as a symbol of good luck. Some believe that if a ladybug lands on you, it's a sign you'll have good luck for as many years as the ladybug has spots. When a ladybug graces our presence, it is as if a small messenger from the universe has arrived to whisper words of encouragement in our ears. I have read that it is a bringer of gifts. It brings oil to Jesus, wine to Mary, and bread to God the Father. For my sister, it is black and white cats. Shortly after Jamie passed, Shelley spotted 2 black and white cats sunning themselves on the roof of a car as she drove to and from Dover, Delaware for her weekly shopping trip. Then a black and white cat appeared at her back door. Shelley named her Noelle and did not hesitate to welcome this cat into her home. Jamie had an affinity for black and white stuffed cats. I recall she even named the one in the hospital that I gave her Shelley, which is her aunt's name. Was she letting her aunt know she would be communicating with her this way in the near future? Or were the appearances of these cats simply coincidental? And I ask, does God bring us comfort through our pets? For me, evidence of Jamie's beautiful spirit was abundant, not only in symbols, but in my vivid dreams in which God sent her to me and communicated her blissful new existence. And I love that one of the fathers in our support group stated, "There are no coincidences, only synchronicities." The Healing Garden on Oxford Road is a wonderful and special place for us to visit when we want to commemorate a holiday, Jamie's birthday, her date of death. Each child in our community who has passed has a brick with their name, date of birth, and date of death. We remember her as we sit in this garden. We hold an annual celebration of life, complete with live butterflies at the beginning of summer. We have a brick here at our church as well, and in our own yard we have another. I've arranged heart-shaped rocks, all collected in our area, including the Bellevue Beach, in our garden, depicting each member of our family. Jamie's rock is the third of the children. In memory of Jamie, we volunteer with those who helped her along her way, such as Positive Strides Riding Center. At our recent horse show, a single ladybug traversed the rim of a donation jar with Jamie's photo on it. It made me smile and say hello. So in conclusion, as I want to say to you, as we experience our pain in a healing way, we realize our loved ones are a gift from God, that there are signs and symbols of their presence, and that their memory will awaken us to the needs of others, and this gives us purpose in life. Thank you.
That's very special sharing. Our last person who's going to share is Mika. Mika, excited to hear what you have to say. Those of you who've never met Mika, Mika works with Richard, and she's been coming here for a while now. It's been a real joy. So,
good morning. Good morning. Be patient with me. I'm a very sensitive person. And thanks for sharing your story. I just want to let you guys know, I was a stranger here, and you guys have welcomed me with open arms. I'll go anywhere where I hear the word and know that the Spirit of God reigns, and I definitely have felt it here. And the first place that I decided to come was the parish. I mean, not the parish, the pantry. And I'm one of those people that collect things. Rich can tell you so. He can let you know in my bedroom I have a collection of herbs. And so I said, Rich, I want to go in the pantry. I said, you know, I keep riding past and, you know, I want to go in there and see what's in there. And he says, and I said, but I'm afraid because I don't want people to think I'm like, you know, stealing or whatever. He said, just go in there. It's a sign that says we welcome all, you know. And so I eventually went in there, and then I, in turn, started giving things. You know, one of my first meals that I prepped for Rich came out of the pantry. So I just want to let you guys know, good morning. and thanks for welcoming me. And I'm gonna first share my favorite scripture, which is, it comes from Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for you to prosper and not to harm you, and to give you hope. And it's given me a lot of hope. Okay, I hope all of you are feeling well today, and that God continues to bless you in that manner. I also want us to remember that we are all blessed. I see better glasses reading, so I have to put them up here. I also want us to remember that we are all blessed when we realize our fortunes versus our misfortunes. Since there are individuals that can literally express things, since there are individuals that cannot literally express things because they are unable to do so because of health reasons. I have a brother that's in a nursing home. He's 4 years older than me, and he had juvenile diabetes, and he never really adjusted to it. He always had complications, and he first understood that sometimes a diet, just because it's meant for one person, it's not meant for all. And they would always say, drink orange juice. Well, he used to drink that when he was first diagnosed and end up in the hospital because it's highly concentrated in sugar. You know, fresh juice is okay when it comes to orange juice, but the one they packed in the container sent him to the hospital, and he had to stay there for days. So with that being said, he's in the hospital, and we're able to express ourselves by saying hi, walking to church, things of that nature. And then some people, all they may be able to do is possibly smile, blink, or even shed a tear when you're communicating with them. I did say we were blessed, right? Okay, I miss Pastor Hugh Pugh and his word. He would always deliver this, because he would always deliver the word, and he was very true spoken. I also remember him always praying for EMS, like paramedics, doctors, nurses, etc., or people that risk their lives, sometimes often to try to save the lives of others. They often run into situations when all odds say that is not the safest thing to do. I am a CNA, DNA, and was trained in the Navy as a hospital corpsman to treat individuals. I've helped deliver babies, I've given immunizations, I worked on the neurology ward, and I've taken care of individuals at the Veterans Hospital. Actually, that was my first experience where I received my training to care for the ill. And it had a major impact on my attitude of how blessed I am, because you see so many dynamics of people that have gone through things as individuals just to give their lives for us, you know, to have freedom. And freedom definitely is not free. I can tell you that. So you sacrifice so much time away from your family, and you know, you give of yourself that many others just would choose not to. Okay, I said I received my first training to care for the ill, and it had a major impact on my life and my attitude of how blessed I was and still am. Before I went into the Navy, I struggled with what my purpose was, and also struggled with survivor's guilt. Even though what I went through, no one had died, I still struggled with my purpose. Like, why am I here? Why was I saved? Because at 2 months and 3 weeks, I was burned in a fire. I was in a house fire where I almost died, and I received 2nd and 3rd degree burns. I'm not crying because of that. I'm crying because God really, truly spared my life. And usually people can often die that are older, but for a baby, you're so tiny. 2 months and 3 weeks is tiny. And my first year of life was spent living in a hospital. And I often think back, sometimes I'm like, you know, my only family most of the time, because my parents lived here, was staff members, you know. And so that led up to, during my teenage years, I often struggled, what was I here for? Why? The purpose, why did I survive that, And at the age of 16, I began to question why God saved me and what was my purpose. I carried a heavy burden about this. Till one day, I went to church and received and accepted having a relationship with Christ. The woman you see today, I was a mean little bugger. My mother used to scold me so because I would look at sometimes how people would treat other people, and especially my mom. She worked in a pharmacy and I worked alongside her. I know she probably wished a million days she'd never said, to her employer, which was a pharmacist, yeah, let her go ahead and work with me, because I wanted to work. Because every time they would be mean to her, I'd say, Mom, let me get at them. So she would say, Miki, she says, don't stoop to their level. And I never understood that other than you can't be like them. You have to be better than them. And so I received and accepted having a relationship with Christ and was saved. What an awesome feeling then, and definitely an awesome feeling now. I later decided, since staff took care of me in the Baltimore Burn Center, I too would give back. And I only had a little short term of doing this, mind you. I was like, I'm gonna give up like 5 years and I'm out of here, as far as taking care of people. It was also further confirmed through my prayers. God said to me one day, you're here to serve people. I cried knowing God was right because I often fought against it. But I knew this type of purpose would mold me to have impact on others and to give others hope. I say mold me because I imagine the maturity. I say mold me because imagine the maturity a person has to have to wearing physical scars since before they could even remember. I got burned on my arms and I got burned on my back. And my mother never reared me to look at myself as different. It was always other people that would see the outward scars and ask questions. Just imagine being so tiny having to answer to adults questions like, it's kind of apparent what happened, but they would always, and then they would put in their stories about what they thought. Oh, did you get burned by popcorn? I'm like, what? It was like, just, put yourself in someone else's shoes, that type of thing. That's how I often would think. But sometimes I would explain to them what happened, sometimes I wouldn't. That was my choice. And I said, saying yes to life, God, and his reason for you to be here is an amazing thing. So in conclusion, you don't have to have any scars physically or mentally, but when God calls on your life, be willing to take his hand, and he'll show you the way through everything. He's the greatest navigator through all our lives. We just have to reach out to him and, help others. And I'm inspired to be here because I'm here to take care of Rich. And we have our battles, we have our good times, but when I saw and heard this man created a company, I said there has to be something inside where I could help them. And that's what I believe. I always tap into people's abilities, not their disabilities. I work with what they have. And Rich, you're a shining star. And I'm further inspired until they don't need me in their house anymore. So like I said, God is the greatest navigator through our lives. That's through the good, bad, and the ugly. That's my favorite Western, by the way. Brought to you by my dad. He loves Westerns. He made you, and he's got you in his arms and his care no matter what. Even in your lowest times, if you just reach out and call on God, he's got you. You just have to reach out to him. And prayers for others help. And much love to you all, and continued blessings and understanding on blessings for you and your families and your lives. And never give up, and there's always hope, and you're always making a difference in someone's lives. Because I came here, I didn't know anybody, and I was greeted with much love and sincerity. And thanks to Jimmy and the rest of, and Lee and the Saucy sisters, you definitely uplift my life every time I come to a luncheon. And most of the time when I decide to go, it's at my lowest point and I need some humor, some laughter, and sisterhood. So God bless you all and take care.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but this has been such an amazing stories that we've heard this morning, and our God is so good, aren't we? So thank you, everybody who shared. If we ever have opportunities in the future, you can all see we all have stories to tell. Don't be afraid. Sure, it's a little scary and vulnerable, but boy, our lives are rich. So thank you, everyone. Lee, you get a hug later because I missed my hug. So we're going to end with a